Donald Trump says recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel will bring peace. It will do quite the opposite. Trump has turned away from any notion of fairness in peace negotiations and run with Israel's ball. I was called by an Irish radio station in Dublin to respond to President Donald Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. What did I think was going on inside the US president's mind, I was asked. And I replied immediately, I don't have the key to the lunatic asylum. What might once have seemed an outrageously over-the-top remark was simply accepted as a normal journalistic reaction to the leader of the world's greatest superpower. And re-listening to the speech that Trump made in the White House, I realized I should have been far less restrained. The very text of the document is insane, preposterous, shameful. Goodbye Palestine. Goodbye the two-state solution. Goodbye the Palestinians. For this new Israeli capital is not for them. Trump did not even use the word Palestine. He talked about Israel and the Palestinians, in other words, of a state and those who do not deserve and can no longer aspire to a state. No wonder I received a call in Beirut last night from a Palestinian woman who had just listened to the Trump destruction of the peace process. Remember Kingdom of Heaven? She asked me, referring to Ridley Scott's great movie of the 1187 Fall of Jerusalem. Well, it is now the Kingdom of Hell. It is not the Kingdom of Hell, of course. The Palestinians have been living in a kind of hell for 100 years, ever since the Balfour Declaration declared Britain's support for a Jewish homeland in Palestine, when a single sentence in which our beloved Theresa May takes such pride became a textbook for refugeedom and the future dispossession of the Palestinian Arabs from their lands. As usual, the Arab response this week was sickening, warning of the dangers of Trump's decision, which was unjustified and irresponsible. This piece of fluff produced by King Salman of Saudi Arabia, the so-called protector of Islam's two holiest places, the third being Jerusalem, although he didn't quite manage to point that out, and we can be sure that in the coming days when an emergency committee will be formed by Arab and Muslim institutions to deal with this danger. They will, as we all know, be worthless. But it was the linguistic analysis of Noam Chomsky when I was at university. He later became a good friend, which I applied to the Trump speech. The first thing I spotted was, as I mentioned above, the absence of Palestine. I always put the word in quotation marks, because I don't believe it will ever exist as a state. Go and look at the Jewish colonies in the West Bank and it is clear that Israel has no intention that it should exist in the future. But that is no excuse for Trump. In the spirit of the Balfour Declaration, which referred to Jews but to the Arabs as existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, Trump downgrades the Arabs of Palestine to Palestinians. Yet even at the start, the chicanery begins. Trump talks about very fresh thinking and new approaches. But there's nothing new about Jerusalem as Israel's capital, since the Israelis have been banging on about this for decades. What is new is that for the benefit of his party, Christian evangelicals, and those who claim to be American supporters of Israel, Trump has simply turned away from any notion of fairness in peace negotiations and run with Israel's ball. Past presidents have issued waivers against the 1995 Jerusalem Congress Act, not because delaying the recognition of Jerusalem would advance the cause of peace, but because that recognition should be given to the city as a capital for two peoples and two states, not one. Then Trump tells us that his decision is in the best interests of the U.S. But he can't explain how by effectively taking America out of future peace negotiations and destroying any claim, admittedly dubious by now, that the U.S. is an honest broker in these talks, this will benefit Washington. It clearly won't, though it might help Trump's party funding since it further lowers American power, prestige and standing across the Middle East. Then he claims that like every other sovereign nation, Israel has the right to determine its own capital. Up to a point, Lord Copper. For when another people, the Arabs rather than just the Jews, also want to claim that city as a capital, or at least the east of it, then that right is suspended until a final peace comes into existence. Israel may claim all of Jerusalem as its eternal and undivided capital, as Netanyahu also claims that Israel is the Jewish state, despite the fact that more than 20% of the people of Israel are Muslim Arabs who live inside its borders. But America's recognition of this claim means that Jerusalem can never be the capital of another nation. And here's the rub. We don't have the slightest idea of the real borders of this capital. Trump actually acknowledged this, in a line that went largely unreported, when he said that we are not taking a position on the specific boundary